The Galactic Senate had been built to make lesser beings feel small. Its chamber rose like a cathedral carved from black crystal, its ceiling disappearing into darkness far above. Hundreds of floating platforms circled the central floor, each occupied by a representative of one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. Some had wings. Some had armored exoskeletons. Some were little more than translucent clouds of living energy. And then there was the human. Elias Ward stood silently behind Princess Lyra Veyne. He looked almost painfully ordinary. An old black combat coat hung from his shoulders. A few scratches marked the metal clasp at his throat. At his hip rested a narrow blade inside a weathered sheath. Nothing about him suggested danger. That was exactly how Elias preferred it. Lyra stood alone in the center of the Senate chamber, her silver-blue ceremonial robes trailing across the polished floor. She was the heir to the Aurelian Dominion. And today, the galaxy had come to watch her fall. Princess Lyra Veyne, announced the High Chancellor, his voice echoing through the enormous chamber. You stand accused of betraying the Galactic Alliance. A murmur passed through the Senate. Lyra did not move. Elias did not move either. The Chancellor leaned forward from his elevated throne. You were entrusted with classified diplomatic intelligence. You violated Senate law. You endangered 47 allied civilizations. That is a lie, Lyra said. The chamber went silent. Elias's eyes moved slightly. Only slightly. His fingers remained away from his blade. The Chancellor's many-jointed hand lifted. Your denial has been recorded. Then record this as well, Lyra replied. I did not betray the Alliance. Someone inside this chamber did. The reaction was immediate. Alien senators hissed. Others clicked their mandibles in outrage. A reptilian delegate rose from his platform. How dare you? Lyra looked toward him. I dare because I know the truth. For the first time, Elias looked directly at the Senate. Not at the Chancellor. At the guards. 24 of them. No. 32. 8 hidden behind the eastern pillars. 4 above the entrance. 2 positioned behind Lyra. Elias counted them without moving his head. His eyes returned to the Chancellor. The High Chancellor smiled. Enough. A deep metallic sound rolled through the chamber. The Senate doors opened. Armed soldiers entered. Their armor was enormous compared to a human's body. Energy weapons glowed in their hands. Lyra's expression changed. Not fear. Recognition. She had known this was coming. Elias noticed. That mattered. Because it meant she had expected the arrest. But not the reason for it. The soldiers surrounded her. Princess Lyra Veyne, the Chancellor declared, by authority of the Galactic Senate, you are hereby placed under arrest. One soldier stepped forward. Submit your hands. Lyra slowly raised them. Elias remained behind her. The soldier glanced at him. Then laughed. A harsh, electronic sound. Human. Elias looked at him. Move aside. Elias said nothing. The soldier took another step. You heard the order. Still nothing. The alien glanced toward the Chancellor. Does he understand Galactic Standard? He understands, the Chancellor replied. The soldier looked back at Elias. Then perhaps humans are as primitive as the records suggest. Several senators laughed. Elias lowered his eyes. For one brief moment, he looked almost embarrassed. Almost. Lyra turned her head slightly. Elias. His eyes met hers. She whispered so quietly that only he could hear. Don't. There was something in her voice. Not fear for herself. Fear for him. Elias studied her face. Then he looked at the soldiers. The nearest guard raised his weapon. Step aside. Human. Elias finally moved. But not away. He stepped forward. One step. Then another. He placed himself directly between Lyra and the soldiers. The laughter stopped. The chamber became silent. The soldier stared at him. Are you refusing a direct Senate command? Elias's hand moved toward his side. Lyra's eyes widened. Elias. The blade slid from its sheath. Slowly. Quietly. The sound of metal leaving leather echoed across the Senate chamber. Every alien went still. The weapon looked unimpressive. Old. Simple. A narrow blade forged from dark metal. The Chancellor stared at it. Then he laughed. You brought a knife into the Galactic Senate? Elias raised the blade. Not toward the Chancellor. Not toward the soldiers. He simply held it at his side. A warning. Nothing more. The Chancellor's smile disappeared. Human, he said, you are standing between the Galactic Senate and a prisoner of the state. Elias looked at Lyra. Then back at the Chancellor. I know. The words were quiet. But somehow, every senator heard them. The guards raised their weapons. Energy began to hum through the chamber. Lyra stepped closer to Elias. Elias, if you do this, there is no going back. His expression remained calm. There wasn't. Her breath caught. The Chancellor leaned forward. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. He had expected a human mercenary, a servant, a bodyguard who would obey. But the man standing before him did not look like any of those things anymore. Elias's posture had changed. Only slightly. His shoulders were relaxed. His feet were perfectly positioned. His blade was angled downward. And yet every soldier facing him suddenly seemed less certain. One of the Senate guards whispered something to another. Elias heard it. Lyra heard it too. Why isn't he afraid? The Chancellor heard it. And now everyone was looking at the human. Elias Ward. A man the Senate had dismissed as insignificant. A man who had just drawn a blade in the center of the most powerful political chamber in the galaxy. The High Chancellor slowly rose from his throne. Put down your weapon. Elias looked at him. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The Chancellor's voice hardened. That is your final command. Elias tightened his grip around the blade. Then he answered, No. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Elias Ward stood in the center of the Senate chamber with his blade lowered at his side. Around him, 32 armed soldiers waited for the order to fire. Behind him stood Princess Lyra Veyne. And above them all, the Galactic Senate watched. Then the High Chancellor spoke. Kill him. The soldiers moved. Elias moved first. The nearest guard raised his energy rifle. Elias stepped inside the weapon's range. The alien fired. The blast tore through the air where Elias's chest had been a fraction of a second earlier. The human twisted. His blade flashed. Not toward the soldier's throat. Toward the weapon. Metal screamed. The rifle fell apart in 2 pieces. The soldier stared at it. Elias struck him once in the chest. The armored alien flew backward and crashed into the polished floor. The entire Senate chamber erupted. Fire! Stop him! He's only human. 3 soldiers attacked simultaneously. Elias turned. 1 rifle. 2. 3. He watched their shoulders. Not their weapons. The shoulders moved first. That was the secret. The human stepped between the blasts as if he had already seen them coming. 1 soldier swung a massive armored fist. Elias ducked. The fist missed. Elias caught the alien's wrist, turned with the momentum, and sent the much larger creature crashing into another guard. The 3rd soldier charged. Elias dropped his blade. The alien hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Elias stepped forward. His palm struck the soldier's helmet. Once. The alien collapsed. Silence returned. 4 soldiers lay unconscious on the Senate floor. Not dead. Not even seriously injured. Elias stood among them. Unharmed. The blade remained several feet away. That was what frightened the Senate most. He hadn't needed it. One of the senators slowly rose from his floating platform. Impossible. Elias looked at him. The senator's throat clicked nervously. Humans aren't supposed to move like that. Elias walked over and picked up his blade. No, he said quietly. He looked around the chamber. You're just not supposed to see us when we do. A wave of whispers spread through the Senate. Lyra stared at him. She had seen Elias fight before. Once. Briefly. Years ago. But never like this. Elias. He turned. There was something different in her voice. Fear. Not of him. For him. She stepped closer. Stop. Elias's eyes remained on the surrounding soldiers. They'll kill you. Not if they stop. They won't. I can surrender. Elias finally looked at her. No. Lyra's expression tightened. Elias, listen to me. No. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You are one man. Elias glanced around the chamber. At the thousands of eyes watching him. At the armed soldiers. At the Senate. Then he looked back at her. So are you. Lyra froze. The words struck harder than they should have. Because that was the problem. To the Senate, she was not a person. She was a political asset. A bloodline. A throne. A target. And Elias had just reminded her of something she had almost forgotten. She was still Lyra. And he was still Elias. Not a soldier. Not a weapon. Not a servant. A person. The High Chancellor slammed his hand against the armrest of his throne. Enough. His voice echoed through the chamber. Human, you have assaulted Senate security personnel. Elias said nothing. You have defied a lawful arrest. Nothing. You have drawn a weapon against the authority of the Galactic Alliance. Elias's expression remained completely calm. The Chancellor leaned forward. And you still believe you have the right to stand there? Elias looked at Lyra. Then back at him. I have the right to stand wherever she needs me. Something changed in Lyra's face. A memory surfaced. 3 years earlier. A different world. A different war. A different Elias. He had been lying in the rain. The sky above him had been red. His armor was gone. His left side was burned. 3 plasma wounds had torn through his body. The human had been abandoned on a battlefield no one expected him to survive. The alien soldiers had already left. They had assumed he was dead. Then Lyra had found him. She had been traveling through the ruins with her diplomatic escort when she saw the human beneath the wreckage. Leave him, one of her guards had told her. Lyra had looked down. He's alive. He's human. I know. He's a mercenary. Lyra had stared at the blood-covered man. So? The guard had looked confused. Princess, we cannot waste medical supplies. Lyra had knelt beside Elias. What's your name? His eyes had barely opened. Elias. Family name. Ward. Mr. Ward, Lyra had whispered. Can you hear me? He had tried to laugh. It had come out as a cough. Depends. On what? Whether you're going to leave me here. Lyra had looked at the burning battlefield. Then at her guards. Get the medical kit. Princess, now. The guard had hesitated. Lyra had turned. Her voice had become cold. I said now. They saved Elias that day. But Lyra had done something else. Something much smaller. Something Elias had never forgotten. When he woke, he found her sitting beside his bed. He had immediately tried to stand. She had pushed him back down. Don't. I'm supposed to protect you. Lyra had smiled. You're supposed to recover. I'm your guard. Today, I'm yours. Elias had stared at her. Nobody had ever said that to him before. Not in the human military. Not during the war. Not during the years he spent working for alien governments that viewed humans as expendable. To them, humans were useful. Strong. Cheap. Replaceable. Lyra had looked at him differently. She had looked at him like he mattered. That was the moment Elias had made a decision. He had never told her. He had never needed to. But from that day forward, the assignment had become personal. The memory vanished. The Senate chamber returned. Lyra was standing in front of him. Elias, she whispered. He understood. She was asking him to stop. Not because she wanted to surrender. Because she was afraid that if he continued, he would die for her. Elias lowered his voice. "You saved my life." Lyra's eyes softened. "That was years ago. I remember. You don't owe me anything." "I know." "Then why?" Elias looked at her. The answer came without hesitation. "Because I choose to." Lyra's eyes glistened. For the first time since entering the Senate chamber, the princess looked close to breaking. Elias turned away before she could see the emotion in his own eyes. The High Chancellor watched them. And suddenly, he smiled. It was not the smile of a man who had lost control. It was the smile of a man who had just remembered something important. "You misunderstand the situation, human." Elias's attention shifted toward him. The Chancellor raised one hand. A holographic display appeared above the Senate floor. Lyra's face appeared on it. Then dozens of classified documents. Encrypted files. Military coordinates. Strategic maps. Names of alien worlds. The Senate erupted in whispers. Lyra went pale. Elias looked at her. "What is that?" Lyra didn't answer. The Chancellor's smile widened. "Evidence." Elias's eyes narrowed. "Of what?" "Of treason." The holographic display changed. A classified file appeared. The name at the top was unmistakable. Lyra Veyne. The Senate watched her. Lyra stared at the image. "That's not real." The Chancellor laughed softly. "Your signature. Forged. Your authorization code. Stolen. Your private communications. Manipulated." The Chancellor leaned forward. "Your access to classified military networks." Lyra's voice became quiet. "That was granted to me." "Then explain why you used it." Elias looked at her. Lyra didn't look back. And suddenly, Elias understood something. She was hiding something. Not from the Senate. From him. "Lyra." She finally met his eyes. "I'm sorry." The words were barely audible. Elias's grip tightened around his blade. "What did you find?" The chamber went silent. The Chancellor's expression changed. Lyra closed her eyes. "Elias." "What did you find?" She opened them again. "The files weren't about me." Elias waited. Lyra glanced toward the Senate. They were about them. The Chancellor's smile disappeared. Elias slowly turned toward the Senate. Lyra continued. "I found communications between several Senate members." "About what?" "Earth." Elias's eyes narrowed. Lyra's voice trembled. "They're planning something." The Senate exploded into chaos. Several representatives shouted. Others demanded that Lyra be silenced. The Chancellor stood. "Enough." Lyra raised her voice over the chaos. "They're going to use my death to start a war." "Silence." Elias stared at her. "What?" The Chancellor's face had gone completely cold. Lyra looked at him. "They want humanity to believe the Senate murdered me." Elias understood. A false assassination. A dead princess. An angry humanity. A war. And someone would profit from it. "Where is the evidence?" Elias asked. Lyra touched the small crystal hidden beneath her robes. The Chancellor saw the movement. His eyes widened. For the first time, Elias saw genuine fear on the alien's face. There. That was the answer. The evidence was real. And the Chancellor knew it. "Elias," Lyra whispered. He looked at her. "Get me out of here." The human glanced toward the Senate doors. Then toward the armed guards. Then back to Lyra. "Can you walk?" She almost smiled. "Yes." "Good." Elias raised his blade. "Then stay behind me." The Chancellor suddenly lifted both hands. "Seal the chamber." The Senate lights went dark. Heavy metallic doors slammed shut. One after another. The exits disappeared behind armored barriers. Red emergency lights flooded the chamber. The guards raised their weapons. Lyra stepped closer to Elias. "Elias." He didn't answer. The High Chancellor smiled. This time, there was no uncertainty in his expression. Only confidence. The chamber had become a prison. The soldiers had surrounded them. And the Senate had finally revealed its true face. The Chancellor looked directly at Elias. You are no longer protecting a princess, human. His eyes moved toward Lyra. Then back to the blade in Elias's hand. You are protecting a traitor. The chamber had become a prison. Red emergency lights pulsed across the black crystal walls. Every exit was sealed. Every weapon was aimed at Elias and Lyra. And somewhere beneath the floor, ancient security systems were waking one by one. Elias stared at the High Chancellor. You are protecting a traitor. The words echoed through the chamber. Lyra's hand tightened around the crystal hidden beneath her robes. Elias noticed. He also noticed something else. The Chancellor wasn't looking at Lyra. He was looking at the crystal. That was enough. Give it to me, Elias whispered. Lyra shook her head. They'll destroy it. That's why I asked. Elias, trust me. She hesitated. Then she placed the crystal in his palm. The moment his fingers closed around it, every sensor in the chamber activated. The Senate knew. The Chancellor's expression changed. Take them. The guards charged. Elias grabbed Lyra's wrist. Run. They moved. Not toward the sealed doors. Toward the eastern wall. Lyra stared at him. There's no exit there. There is. How do you know? I counted the walls. Before she could ask what that meant, Elias slammed his shoulder against a section of black crystal. Nothing happened. A soldier fired. Elias pulled Lyra down. The energy blast passed above them. Elias rolled, came up on one knee, and threw his blade. The weapon struck a control panel hidden behind the wall. The panel exploded. A narrow passage opened. Lyra stared. You knew that was there? No. Then how? Because the wall was 3 centimeters thicker than the others. He grabbed her hand. Move. They disappeared into darkness. Behind them, the Senate guards poured into the passage. Elias ran. Lyra struggled to keep pace. Elias, keep moving. Where are we going? Somewhere they can't hear us. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. They turned a corner. Elias suddenly stopped. Lyra nearly collided with him. What is it? He raised one finger. Silence. Then Lyra heard it. Footsteps. Behind them. But there was something else. A faint mechanical vibration. Elias looked upward. Drones. A moment later, 3 security drones descended from the ceiling. Their weapons opened. Elias pushed Lyra behind him. The drones fired. He moved, not quickly. Precisely. The first blast struck the wall. Elias used the flash to blind the second drone. He grabbed a loose cable from the ceiling and pulled. The electrical current surged through the corridor. The drones dropped. Lyra stared at him. You've done this before. Elias looked at the smoking machines. Something similar. Where? Different planet. Which planet? Doesn't matter. Elias. He looked at her. She was no longer asking as a princess. She was asking as the woman who had once saved his life. Who are you? For a moment, Elias said nothing. Then the alarms began screaming again. He looked toward the distant corridor. We don't have time. Lyra stepped closer. We have to make time. Elias's expression hardened. You want the truth? Yes. Then listen carefully. He lowered his voice. I wasn't assigned to you because the Senate requested a bodyguard. Lyra froze. Then why? Because Earth requested me. The words seemed to drain the air from the corridor. Lyra stared at him. Elias continued. Your government didn't know. Why would Earth care about me? Because you're one of the few people in this galaxy who ever stood between humanity and extinction. Lyra's eyes widened. What are you talking about? 20 years ago, Your father voted against the Helix Coalition's plan to classify humans as a hostile species. Lyra remembered. She had been a child. She had heard stories. Humanity had nearly been declared an enemy of the galaxy. One vote had stopped it. Her father's vote. Elias nodded. Your father saved Earth. Lyra stared at him. And you? I was one of the people Earth sent to make sure history didn't forget that debt. A distant explosion shook the corridor. The Senate guards were getting closer. Elias looked down at the crystal. Now tell me what's inside this. Lyra swallowed. The evidence. Evidence of what? The war. Elias's eyes narrowed. Lyra activated the crystal. A holographic projection appeared between them. Names. Senators. Military commanders. Secret communications. Weapons contracts. Coordinates. Elias watched in silence. Then he saw the first message. Phase 1. Remove Aurelian obstacle. Below it was another. Target. Princess Lyra Veyne. Lyra's voice trembled. I found the files 3 weeks ago. Elias looked at her. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know who I could trust. That answer hurt. Elias looked away. Lyra continued. I thought they were planning a coup. That's not a coup. I know. How many worlds? 7. 7. 7 major civilizations. Elias's face changed. 7 governments are involved? Lyra nodded. They want Earth. The corridor seemed suddenly colder. Lyra expanded the projection. A map appeared. Human territory glowed at the center. Around it, 7 alien military zones formed a circle. Elias understood immediately. They're surrounding Earth. Yes. How long? 36 days. Elias stared at the map. Then he saw something else. What's this? Lyra looked. A small red marker blinked near the edge of human space. Her face went pale. I don't know. Elias zoomed in. The coordinates belonged to a human military relay station. Lyra whispered, That's impossible. What? That's an Earth defense network. Elias's expression became cold. Then someone has access to it. A new message appeared. False flag event. Pending. Lyra's breathing stopped. Elias read the next line. Aurelian princess to be executed. Below it, human response expected. Military retaliation. Lyra stared at the screen. They're going to kill me. Yes. And blame it on the Senate. Yes. And Earth will attack. That's the plan. Lyra's voice broke. Then billions could die. Elias looked at her. That's why they chose you. Why? Because you're the only person who found out. A heavy door opened somewhere behind them. Elias turned. The guards had reached the corridor. Dozens of armored soldiers poured into the passage. Elias grabbed Lyra. Run. They sprinted. The corridor split. Elias chose the left. Lyra followed. Where are we going? Communications tower. We need to get the evidence out. Exactly. If we reach it, we can broadcast everything. That's the idea. They reached a massive elevator. Elias pressed the controls. Nothing. Lyra looked at him. Locked. Elias pulled his blade. Move. He drove the blade into the control panel. The elevator doors opened. Lyra stared at him. That isn't a normal sword. Elias stepped inside. No. The doors closed. For the first time, Lyra looked at the weapon differently. What is it? Elias looked down at the blade. A promise. The elevator began to rise. To whom? Elias didn't answer. The doors opened. They stepped into the communications level and found themselves surrounded. Elias stopped. Lyra stopped beside him. Soldiers filled the room. Above them, Senate security drones hovered. Behind them, the elevator doors sealed. The High Chancellor's voice came through the speakers. Impressive. Elias looked around. The Chancellor continued. You found our hidden communications network. Elias's expression didn't change. You shouldn't have left it exposed. The Chancellor laughed. Do you really believe you can escape? Elias glanced at Lyra. She was surrounded. The crystal was still in his hand. The evidence was still safe. For now. Then Elias noticed something. The communication terminals were active. Several of them. He looked at the nearest screen. A transmission was running. Someone was sending a message. Elias smiled faintly. The Chancellor noticed. What is it? Elias said nothing. The soldiers attacked. This time, there were too many. Elias fought. One fell. Then another. A third. But more came. An energy blast struck his shoulder. He staggered. Lyra screamed his name. Elias. He turned. That was his mistake. A stun weapon struck him in the back. His body locked. The blade fell. Elias crashed to his knees. Lyra was seized by two soldiers. No. She fought them. Elias. He looked up. For the first time, Lyra saw blood on his face. The guards dragged him away. The Chancellor's voice filled the room. Take the human. Elias was forced through the Senate doors. Back into the chamber where everything had begun. The senators watched as the human was dragged before them. Lyra was forced to kneel beside him. Elias remained silent. The High Chancellor descended from his throne. You defied the Senate. Silence. You attacked our soldiers. Silence. You accessed classified systems. Nothing. The Chancellor smiled. And you attempted to expose our secrets. Elias slowly raised his head. Attempted? The Chancellor's smile disappeared. Elias looked around the chamber. At the senators. At the guards. At the communication terminals. At Lyra. Then back at the Chancellor. Something had changed. The human no longer looked trapped. The Chancellor didn't understand. Execute him. Two soldiers raised their weapons. Lyra struggled against the guards holding her. No. Elias looked at her. For the first time, he smiled. Not because he was safe. He wasn't. Not because he had won. He hadn't. He smiled because the Senate had finally made the mistake he had been waiting for. The High Chancellor stared at him. What is so amusing? Elias looked toward the communications network. Then back at the Chancellor. His voice was calm. Almost gentle. You should have killed me before I reached your communications network. The Senate chamber fell silent. Elias Ward stood on his knees beneath the cold red lights, blood running from his temple. Two alien guards held weapons against his back. Princess Lyra was restrained several meters away. And above them, the High Chancellor smiled. You should have killed me before I reached your communications network. The Chancellor's smile vanished. What did you do? Elias said nothing. The Chancellor turned toward the communications terminals. One by one, the screens began to change. The Senate seal disappeared. A new symbol appeared. A blue planet. Earth. Every senator stared. No, someone whispered. The Chancellor's face went pale. The first transmission appeared. Then another. And another. Encrypted Senate communications. Military coordinates. The assassination plan. The false flag operation. Everything. Elias had not merely accessed the network. He had copied it. And transmitted it. Lyra stared at him. When? Elias looked toward her. While we were running. Her eyes widened. You said you were trying to reach the tower. I was. And the transmission? That too. The Chancellor stepped backward. You couldn't have. Elias smiled. You gave me access to your network. The Senate erupted. Hundreds of alien voices filled the chamber. Silence. Those files are fabricated. Look at the encryption. That's impossible. The signatures are authentic. The Chancellor shouted. Shut down the network. Technicians rushed to the terminals. Too late. The evidence was already everywhere. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the truth unfold. Then something appeared on the massive window overlooking space. A light. Then another. Then hundreds. The Senate chamber went completely silent. The High Chancellor slowly turned. Outside the Senate world, the stars were disappearing. Not because of darkness. Because something enormous was blocking them. Human warships. Hundreds of them. They emerged from hyperspace with terrifying precision. Long black vessels. Massive carriers. Silent destroyers.
Orbital platforms.
The human fleet surrounded the Senate world. The aliens stared in horror. Someone whispered, "They came." Another senator looked at Elias. "Why aren't they firing?" Elias slowly rose to his feet. The guards no longer held him. They had forgotten to. He looked out at the fleet. Because they weren't sent here to conquer you. The Chancellor stared at him. Then why are they here? Elias turned. His eyes met the Chancellor's. Because you threatened one of ours. A silence deeper than before settled over the chamber. One of the alien senators shook his head. One. Elias looked toward Lyra. One ally. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. Elias nodded toward her. Your princess. The Chancellor laughed nervously. You expect us to believe humanity sent an entire fleet for one alien? No. Elias looked back toward the window. I expect you to understand that humanity doesn't measure loyalty by numbers. Then the communications network activated. Lyra stepped forward. Elias. He looked at her. She held the crystal. The evidence. The proof. Her hands were trembling. What if they attack? Elias looked toward the human fleet. They won't. How do you know? Because I know humans. Lyra almost smiled. Then she stepped toward the central communications platform. The Senate guards did not stop her. No one did. She placed the crystal into the system. The chamber lights dimmed. Across the galaxy, every major civilization received the transmission. The truth appeared. The secret meetings. The planned invasion. The assassination order. The intended false flag. The Senate's plan to murder Lyra and blame humanity. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the first response arrived. The ambassador of the Veyne coalition appeared on the main display. You ordered the death of Princess Lyra? The Chancellor said nothing. Another transmission. Then another. World after world. Government after government. The conspirators' allies began withdrawing. Military fleets changed course. Treaties were suspended. Secret agreements were exposed. The war machine that had taken years to build collapsed in minutes. The Chancellor stared at the screens. No. His voice became desperate. No, you don't understand. Lyra turned toward him. I understand perfectly. The Chancellor looked at her. You would destroy the galaxy. Lyra shook her head. No. She looked toward the human fleet. You tried to. The Chancellor's eyes filled with rage. He reached beneath his ceremonial robes. Elias saw the movement. His body reacted before his mind finished processing it. Lyra. The Chancellor drew a hidden weapon. Everything happened at once. The guards raised their rifles. Lyra turned. The Chancellor fired. Elias moved. He crossed the distance between them. The energy blast struck his blade. The weapon screamed. Elias twisted. The blast deflected into the ceiling. The Chancellor fired again. Elias stepped aside. Again. Again. The human moved through the attack with terrifying calm. The Chancellor stumbled backward. Elias reached him. One strike. The weapon flew from the alien's hand. One more. The Chancellor fell. Elias stood above him. The entire Senate watched. The Chancellor looked up. Kill me. Elias's blade was at his throat. The Chancellor smiled weakly. Do it. Elias stared down at him. You want me to? Yes. Why? Because that's what humans do. Elias lowered the blade. No. The Chancellor's expression changed. Elias stepped away. That's what you wanted us to do. The Senate became silent. Elias looked at the alien representatives. You wanted humanity to become angry. He pointed toward the Chancellor. You wanted us to destroy your worlds. He looked toward the fleet outside. You wanted a war. Then Elias lowered his weapon. But we don't fight because someone tells us to. He looked at Lyra. We fight when someone we love needs us. The words struck the Senate harder than any weapon. For centuries, the galaxy had believed humanity was dangerous because humans were violent, because they were aggressive, because they possessed terrifying military technology. They had misunderstood. The real danger was something far simpler.
Humans rememberat.
They remembered who had helped them, who had betrayed them, who had stood beside them when the galaxy had turned away. And once a human considered someone family. Walking away was no longer an option. The Senate guards slowly lowered their weapons. One by one. The High Chancellor was arrested. The conspirators were removed from their positions. The evidence was verified. And Princess Lyra Veyne was cleared of every accusation. The Senate chamber that had once demanded her arrest now stood silent as she walked to the center of the room. The High Chancellor's throne was empty. Lyra looked at the senators. You tried to turn humanity against us. No one answered. You believed humans were easy to manipulate. Still nothing. You believed that if you killed one person, you could control the reaction of an entire species. Lyra turned toward Elias. But you forgot something. Elias looked at her. Lyra smiled. Humans choose for themselves. For the first time, the Senate stood. Not in fear. In respect. The representatives of dozens of civilizations rose from their platforms. One after another. The entire chamber stood. Elias looked uncomfortable. Lyra noticed. You don't like this. Not really. Why? Too many people staring. She laughed. It was the first genuine laugh either of them had shared that day. The Senate offered Elias a military command. He refused. They offered him a diplomatic position. He refused. They offered him wealth, land, and political authority. He refused all of it. Finally, Lyra stepped forward. The chamber quieted. I have one final declaration. Elias looked at her. Lyra. She smiled. Just listen. She turned toward the Senate. From this day forward, I appoint Elias Ward as guardian of the Aurelian Dominion. A murmur spread through the chamber. Elias stared at her. Lyra. She continued. He will serve not because he is ordered to. Her eyes met his. But because he chooses to. The Senate erupted in applause. Alien wings opened. Clawed hands struck platforms. Voices echoed through the chamber. Elias simply stood there. The human who had arrived wearing an old combat coat. The human who had been underestimated. The human who had been ordered to kneel. Now the entire Senate stood for him. Lyra walked toward the exit. Elias followed. They passed beneath the enormous Senate doors. For the first time, neither of them was running. Neither was being hunted. They simply walked. Together. As they reached the outer balcony, Lyra stopped. The stars stretched endlessly before them. Human warships still surrounded the Senate world. But their weapons remained silent. Their purpose was complete. A young alien representative approached them. He was barely old enough to hold a Senate seat. He looked at Elias with something between fear and admiration. Guardian. Elias turned. The young alien hesitated. May I ask you something? Elias glanced at Lyra. She smiled. Go ahead. The alien looked toward the human fleet, then toward the Senate behind them. Why did you risk an entire war for one woman? Elias said nothing. For a moment, he simply looked at Lyra, the princess who had once knelt beside a dying human on a battlefield, the woman who had treated him as a person when everyone else had called him disposable, the ally who had stood against an entire Senate. Then Elias looked toward the stars. His hand rested against the blade at his side. Because she was never just one woman. He looked back at the young alien. His voice was quiet, but every being nearby heard him. She was our ally. Elias looked toward the human fleet, then toward Lyra, and finally, toward the endless galaxy beyond. And humanity does not abandon its own.